Hello, my name's Brenda Burgess, and I'm a ceramic artist. I didn't start calling myself that right away. It's probably 10 years ago, but I was in a show, and they gave me a little tag, and underneath my name it said artist, and I said, I am an artist. I'm a ceramic artist. I kept that tag for a long time, but I hope you reach a point, if you haven't already, that you begin thinking of yourself as an artist. And I'm a ceramic artist. I'm a member of the Ventura County Potters Guild, and that's why I'm doing this video. On November 23rd, we're having our members meeting. Of course, it's on Zoom. And I was asked to do a studio tour. We're calling this Brenda's Garage Studio Tour. So let me give you a little background about myself. I was raised in Ohio and was very lucky because in Ohio during that time, we had art classes every single week, K through 12. It was both the visual arts and the performing arts. So by the time I was in high school, I'd concentrated more on music. So I was a member of the dance band and the orchestra and the marching band. I always hated when we got a touchdown in football and we had to stop talking and enjoying ourselves and play for the band and play that, they called it the fight song. Long time ago. So once I graduated from Ohio State University and I was teaching, I started taking classes in the evening and in the summer, and they were all art classes. It was hard to take the fundamentals, but I tried as much as I could. But at one point, I walked into my ceramics class. I saw my instructor throw on the wheel, and it was magic, and I was hooked. Now, because I was older, they let me do a lot of things that I don't think they really should have, but I got away with it. I was able to fire a salt kiln all by myself. Who would do that? But, and also other kilns. I fired a cone 10 all by myself, reduction. But we also had incredible people coming in the summer. I actually learned raku from Paul Soldner. So once I moved to California and retired, I went back to art again. Previous to that, I was basically using my creativity to problem solve on the job. But once I started retirement, I went back to the community colleges and started taking all the fundamental classes because I could take them anytime I wanted to. But again, I got sidetracked by ceramics and I didn't look back. So what we're going to do is a tour of my studio, and we'll start by going outside and looking at how I've set up my garage. Talk to you in a second. So let's take a look at my kiln. I have a Crest kiln, model B23H, and it has a kiln sitter. If you're not familiar with those because you're lucky enough to have a computer running your program, you place a bar type or a small cone between 3 pieces of metal, and when the cone melts, it disrupts the flow of electricity and shuts the kiln down. I initially was always using cones, but it just seemed so difficult to get the wire that was going to cause the action or the reaction in the right place, because it made sense if it was more this direction or this direction, it would be measuring different temperatures. This is a cone 5. So we went to the bar type and been experimenting with that, and it seems to work. But I really don't trust just the kiln sitter. I have a pyrometer that I run into the bottom level of the kiln. It's one of the less expensive ones, not made of platinum, so it's good for about 50 firings. So in addition to that, I use standing cones. So if I were firing to cone 5, I would have a 4, 3, 4, 5, and a 6 at each level. This is what they look like once they're fired. Okay, this is the last firing I did, and you'll see, oops, if I move my thing, that the cones to the left were completely down. The cones to the center, which were in the center of the kiln, they went down, and the cones at the top, they also went down, so I reached temperature. And this is the type of documentation I keep. The date, the temperature I'm firing to, is it bisque or is it a glaze, the cones that I put in this cone I was aiming for 05, so I had an 04 and an 05 in there at the middle, bottom, and top, and that's a sketch showing about how I loaded the kiln. There was a larger bowls, probably at 6 or 7 inch post, then a small, there were some test tiles we put in the center, and then we had a lot higher stuff on the top. And what time did I start or change the temperature? What was the temperature? No, this was the temperature of the kiln. The notches on the temperature rise on the kiln, and the difference between each level, how fast it was going up. With a bisque, I try to go 100 degrees up to about 1600, and then I just go full-fledged. Okay. It's a little bit manic keeping this much information, but we're trying to figure out the system. Now, in terms of our doing a glaze firing, we used to coat the shelves with a kiln wash, and I got tired of washing it off and putting it on, brushing it off, repainting it, brushing it off, and having little specks on some of my wear. So we adopted something that they use at Van Moore Park College, which are called cookies. And they're smaller, and you can see you still have the same problem, but they don't seem to wear as quickly as the full shelf being done, and you just choose the appropriate cookie size, but there's a lot of wasted space. So we came up with this idea that we made a drawing of our shelf and estimated how much it would shrink, and these are the second batch to come out. The first batch I made too thin, but these are much thicker. They just came out of the bisque we unloaded, so they're ready to be kiln washed. I don't know whether it's going to make any difference, but we'll see. That's what you're doing when you fire, is problem solving constantly, it seems like. And when we load the kiln, the first thing we do is sweep it out, and as we put each cookie or sheet, depending on which we're using, we brush everything down to make sure there's no extra dust in the kiln that could circulate during the firing and end up in my glaze. So that's pretty much how we handle firing. These are the cones from my 11-7, and as you can see, we had some problems. The cones at the bottom didn't tilt at all, and the cones at the top were pretty darn good. So I don't know. It's frustrating. This is the third time I've recorded this segment. I'm going to try to do better this time. This is an area, a zone where it's a combination of storage, but I can actually work here also. And am right now on a sculptural project I'm doing. But the shelving keeps things that I don't use very often, but it's not difficult to reach them. And then I have an area here for tools that I hardly ever use anymore, but I've got to remember that they're there. I got really interested, I still am interested in making tiles. These are some of the tiles that I did the sgraffito technique on, and it's white clay, black slip, and then carving through when it's just a perfect dryness. You just carve through it with a loop tool, and it should peel off almost solid. If it's crumbling, it's not dry enough. If it falls down into the cracks, you need to let it dry a little more. But I just really like the technique because it calls upon my love of drawing. But it also is interesting because it feels like you're doing printmaking almost. You're carving into that piece of metal, and I really enjoy it. These are some of the other ones. This is another cactus series I did. And typically what I do is I mount them on a piece of masonite that's somewhat a little smaller than the actual tile. And then I would have painted this black, and using some copper wire, make a little loop to hang it by, and glue it down. And these are some tiles that I made when I first got my slab roller. Okay. And as I said before, I've been lucky enough to experience lots of different things. These are some of the luster tiles I did using a wiggle wire. These are some broken pieces from the dome series I did that were just too neat to throw away. So the way I organize my work, I'm going to turn you sideways so don't get car sick. Okay. I buy peaches from Trader Joe's a lot. So I use this stacking storage for bisque that needs to be glazed, projects that I started in a workshop and I never finished, projects that need one more thing done to them, maybe a back put on them, and then going down further, my test tiles, and this is a sculpture project I'm working on right now where I'm using slip, paper clay, and making kind of it's going to be seen like this. Don't get car sick. As if you were looking at a wave. You can't really see it. I shouldn't even show it to you, but now you've seen it. There you are. Okay? I'm going to move on to the next section. Another zone is where the slab roller is. I was just able to fit it in next to the sweeper that I use to clean out the kiln. I use storage underneath for clay. And then as you go over, there's the kiln again. It's where I store my commercial glazes, and the whole counter underneath those glazes is dedicated to bisqueware that needs to be bisqued or glazed so that we know exactly where we stand. Over in the right there is where I keep all the supplies for kiln wash, and this area here is for my rejected pieces, which I'm not quite ready to throw away. I want to use them as inspiration for trying them one more time. And this is my other work table. I was really lucky that my neighbor was moving to Oregon, and he built these 2 tables to put his computers on. And when they moved, they didn't want to break them down, and they didn't want to take them, so I ended up with them. This is my main work table. You can see underneath the maroon is a tall cylindrical form I'm working on. Underneath, you can see that I have a roll of butcher paper, which I find very useful for making drawings. I like to start with a drawing when I'm making something. And then under the table is something that Wynn suggested. Let me get rid of the foam. That's just a storage place. I put it on wheels. And it's a wet box. Right now I'm using it to rehydrate some clay. Let's see how it's doing. It's getting there. It's not getting there, but this has been in here for a while, and you just I'm letting all the moisture out right now, so I'll put it back together and roll it under. These dollies are incredible. So, and the foam comes in so handy. Right now I'm working on organizing my tools. I decided to use the cup method, but since then I've been working on just making little square columns that will fit into this, and I can have different tools under different things. And the active clay I'm working on, and this wonderful long work surface with a light that isn't plugged in right now. This is another storage area. I took glaze calculation at Ventura College for quite a few semesters, so I ended up with lots of test tiles that I can't part with. And then over here is where I keep the raw materials that I keep on hand. Not much, because I use mostly commercial glazes. And then where I keep all of my plaster molds. And my notebooks and my glazes, and just getting ready to put this on the old plaster bat and see what happens. The only other thing I can show you is the importance of having your cleaning tools that you use in a different place from your house cleaning tools, so you always know which one you're using. And I sponge off my work table every time I use it. I sweep at the end of a session, because I have neighbors that have trees that are losing their leaves and they're flying underneath my garage door. And then I mop. I mopped just before you came. So, that's my studio. My garage studio in Ventura. It serves me well. I'm not here as much as I'd like to be, but it serves me well. I'll be sitting in this chair thinking about you. Thanks for coming. Bye-bye. Well, the tour is over. I hope you've learned something. I always felt that if I went to any kind of a workshop, be it when I was working and it was a seminar or a clay workshop, if I learned one thing that I maintained and started using, that felt it had been worth the while. I hope you've learned something. Everything I showed you has been some things I've learned from other people, like my wet box and the sgraffito and all of the things I've learned from other people. So go on your way, play with clay, and be happy and safe. Bye-bye.